Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a series review of the Daevabad Trilogy by S.A. Chakraborty. This is one of my all-time favourite series. I love this series to pieces and I want to persuade all of you, everyone to read this series. So it's a gush review of the whole trilogy. I have read this series multiple times now. I have read The City of Brass and The Kingdom of Copper 3 times now, and the Empire of Gold twice. So I thoroughly enjoy this. I've really tested it out to make sure that I love it, and I definitely love it. I've recently just reread the whole trilogy via audiobook, and so for the first 2 times I've read it physically, whereas now I've read it with the audiobooks, and I strongly recommend both modes of reading it, both methods. What I want to talk about is the premise of the first book and how the series sort of develops, and whether you should read it and whether you think it should be a series for you. So this is a epic adult fantasy series that's set, it's the first book starts off in Cairo, but overall taking flavours of like the whole of the Middle East, and those are the influences that are within this fantasy world. So the first book, you start off in Cairo following our main character Nari. Nari has always had these abilities to sort of heal herself. She can understand all the different languages. She can sense if someone is ill. But she doesn't really know what that means. She just goes, well, I'm slightly different. I'm different. She doesn't go, I'm magical or anything. She just goes, I'm different. She doesn't know her heritage at all. And at the beginning of the book, she accidentally summons a Jinn warrior to her, where they travel to the magical city of Daevabad, which is the city of the Jinn. And she starts to discover her heritage and what this all means, and the series definitely goes from there. That's just like the catalyst to it all. You have 3 perspectives. You have Nari, who I've just explained. You have Dara, who is the Jinn warrior that she summons to her, and you have Ali, who is a prince from Daevabad. So you follow all of them. Nari, you get her perspective. I think she is my favourite of the 3 of them. Like, you really do grow attached to her as a character, and what she goes through as she discovers the city, and she discovers her powers, and she discovers her position within the city, and like the shock of going from being a nobody to a somebody. And then Dara he has a lot of turmoil in his past and his history, and finding out all about that and what he brings and his inner struggles. And then Ali as a whole, I feel like Ali and both Dara, they're able to give us a bit of the history to the world. Like, Ali is brought up in this city. You see how naive and I guess innocent that he is, and he is a means of sort of giving us and Nari the sort of the perspective of the city and what's going on there and the politics. So it's I thoroughly enjoyed the introduction to the world and what you get. I will say this book is definitely like the start of the trilogy, and there is a lot of, I mean, you have the whole travelling scene as they travel to Daevabad. This one I'd say definitely needs more, it leans more romantic than the rest of the series. So if you aren't a fan of the romance in this book, then I wouldn't be too scared about continuing, because the rest of the series isn't that romantic. Like the romantic subplot is more present in this one than in the rest of the series. As just an aside, I would say as we move into the rest of the series, it becomes a lot more political. The second book is very political. I'd say this is the most political of the series, and the main focus of this is the politics within Daevabad as a whole. And then the third book is sort of a mixture of the two, that there is travelling, but there is also politics within the third book, and so it sort of combines those 2 elements of the first and the second book in this third book, as it has travel and politics. So that's that. So it depends what you like within your books. If you like more of the travelling adventure fantasy, then the first book might end up being your favourite. If you like more of the politics, then the second one, and this one really is a combination of all of those elements. What I will say is the strength for me within this series is the mythology. It's the mythology is so interesting, and not something that I've really seen in that many other fantasy books, that the focus is on learning about these Jinn and the Deva and the Marriage, and it's fantastical creatures and a fantasy system which I haven't seen or read about in fantasy before. I mean, in fantasy, in like the Western fantasies that you read, I've read so much about, I don't know, elves and dwarves and dragons and things, and those things aren't in this. This is all based on Middle Eastern inspired fantasy, and I loved that. I really loved getting to experience this new, well, not new mythology, but this new mythology to me, and diving into that and experiencing this mythology. I thoroughly loved it, as well as the mythology, but the magic that they have, and like the different elements. So like the ones that are able to work with water or fire and that elemental magic. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But the other strength, and I'd say, and this is definitely the strength in the second book for me as a whole, is the politics and the political machinations that go on. The world of the Deva and the Jinn is very fraught, and you do experience this in the first book, but it only builds as the series go on, and you really get to see the tensions between the different Jinn families and the warring tensions between them. And this really is the main element, I would say, in this second book, that you really get to see the struggles and the warring sides of the different Jinn and the Devas, and the struggle of maintaining the peace between them. And that you follow characters with different ideologies and different motives, and seeing that you can see I think S.A. Chakraborty does such a good job of showing a character's motives, and you support them. You can see where they're coming from, you can see their motives, and you're like, they're fighting for the good. And then you also follow another character who's on the other side, and you can see their motives, and you can see why they're doing their thing, and you can see why they're supporting their people. But they're both supporting their people, and they're both trying to do what's best, or what they believe is best. And so these factions are against each other, but neither one is right or wrong. It's the bubbling up of centuries worth of tension between different peoples, and the struggles of maintaining a city where different factions have different priorities and different means. So I found it very well done, and seeing the different political struggles and the struggles that each of our individual characters have to go through within this book is so interesting and so well done. So well done. It's one of my favourite political fantasy books. I mean, I don't know if this is actively advertised as political fantasy, because this is political fantasy with the mythology. There's also, I guess, sort of a military style bit in this as well. So that is where my thoughts and my favourite aspects of this. Again, my other favourite bits, I said, my favourite bits are the mythology and the politics. My other favourite bits of this series are the characters. These characters, I feel like they are real people. Like, they are so fleshed out and so well done. Like, they feel as though they could be real people, because they are realistic. They make realistic choices for who they are. And S.A. Chakraborty has done such a good job of really fleshing them out and really giving them personalities, and you can see their motives, you can see why they make decisions, you want to throw them, you want to shake them sometimes, because you're like, why are you making these decisions? Like, why are you doing that? But they are realistic to who they are as people. So you can't fault them for that. And the characters and their dynamics, I mean, as alongside these three main characters, the secondary, the surrounding cast is amazing as well. And they're all very fleshed out. And as well, the twists, there are some twists in here. I never see them coming. I'm like, even when on reread, I'm like, oh, this twist is so good. So good. And one of the things that I also want to highlight is that she sticks to the landing. The conclusion to this series, is one of the most satisfying conclusions I've ever read. And I'm not saying satisfying tied up with a bow, everything's perfect. It is satisfying in the sense that it is bittersweet, it is wrapped up, but there are elements where you can see that the world is going to keep going, and it's not like everything's happy. It's just the most satisfying conclusion, in that you feel emotional because you're coming to the end of a series, and you're feeling emotional for the characters and what they're going through, and it's realistic, and it completely wraps up the trilogy. I was so satisfied when I finished this, and when I was on my reread, I was getting emotional, going, I'm so emotional. I didn't cry, but I feel like it could make people cry, that ending. Not because it's necessarily that sad. I mean, there is sad elements to it, but it's very emotional. It's an emotional ending, and so satisfying. Really does absolutely stick the ending. If you are worried about that, it really does. It's an amazing ending. And this is a series that just reminds me how much of why I love reading. And sometimes you can get into a point, sometimes I can get to a point when you're reading average books, and you're like, why am I reading? What do I get out of this? But reading this trilogy and reading about these characters and this world, this reminds me of why I love reading and why reading is a hobby that I thoroughly enjoy, and why I want to spend my time reading. Like, this trilogy does that for me, that I feel so fulfilled whilst reading this series. Like, I may be like emotional. It just, as a whole, this reminds me why I love reading. Like, when reading the third book for the first time, I remember going, I never want this book to end. And I was reading it like, I have to know what's going to happen next. I have to keep reading. I have to know what's going to happen. I can't stop. But I've also got to this point where I was like, I never want this book to end. I never want this book to end, because it is so good. And once it ends, it's over. And then it's over with, and I'm finished. And I never wanted it to end. So having that experience and having that sense of enjoyment whilst reading, it's one of the best feelings. It really is one of the best feelings, and I get this from this trilogy. And so I would highly recommend it. I've talked about this in quite a few videos now, but if you haven't read the Daevabad Trilogy, then please read the Daevabad Trilogy. And I know some people, I gave all of these books 5 stars. Every single one was 5 stars for me. I feel as though the first book is the weakest, and it does get better. And I have heard other people say that I feel like if you don't like this first book, I think you could still really like the second and third book. Can you hear that ice cream van? There goes the ice cream van. The ice cream van singing the songs of the Daevabad Trilogy. So this isn't a should you read, because I believe everyone should read the Daevabad Trilogy. I feel like this series will work for so many readers. I feel like it really will work for a lot of readers out there, and I think it deserves all of the love and to be read. And I cannot wait for more S.A. Chakraborty books, because this is so good and should be read by everyone, because it is amazing. And I will everyone should read this. You all need to read this series, because then we can gush about it together. I want everyone to read this. I really do. If you want to hear more of my thoughts or spoilery thoughts, I have been doing discussions on each of these books over on Vish from Books with V's channel. We have discussions up already for The City of Brass and for The Kingdom of Copper. These are up on her channel. And The Empire of Gold we will be doing later on this month. So that will be coming. So if you want to hear all of our spoilery opinions and spoilery thoughts on each of the books, then they will be over there. Please go away and read these books if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!